Okay, so we finally reached the end of our video series on the review of financial statements, and that's in ARC Section 90A. So in this last video, we will discuss review documentation. So what documentation should we include in our audit file? And so it says that we should prepare review documentation that's sufficient to enable an experienced accountant having no previous connection to the review to understand the nature, timing, and extent of the review procedures performed to comply with SSARS, the results of the review procedures performed, and the review evidence obtained, and significant findings or issues arising during the review, conclusions reached thereon, and significant professional judgments made in reaching those conclusions. So when we're deciding what to document, we have to think in our minds, if there was another accountant who's knowledgeable about GAAP and SARS and applicable standards and procedures, and that person was coming in to look at our work that we've done in the review, what should we include that would inform them of all of these matters? And in addition to that, we should include in our review documentation the engagement letter or other suitable form of written documentation with management, and that was in ARC Section 98.11 through 12. And we should also include communications to management and others regarding fraud or non-compliance with laws and regulations, as required by paragraph 51 in another video. We should also include communications with management regarding our expectation to include an emphasis of a matter or other matter paragraph in our review report, and we discussed that in paragraph 55 in another video. And next, we should include communications with other accountants that have audited or reviewed the financial statements of significant components as required by paragraph 79. We should also include our representation letter and also a copy of the reviewed financial statements and the accountant's review report thereon. And so if we make sure to include each of these items, we can be assured of having included the appropriate amount of documentation of our review. And so to get some more details on what this entails, we can go down to the Explanatory Material section. It's A141 through A145. So let's go there now. Okay, so now we're down in Explanatory Material discussing review documentation. It says that review documentation may be recorded on paper or on electric or other media, so we don't necessarily have to have a manual binder with paper. We can have all this saved on our computer and certain documents. We also need not include in our review documentation superseded drafts of work papers and financial statements, or notes that reflect incomplete or preliminary thinking, or previous copies of documents corrected for typographical or other errors, and duplicates of documents. So we should only include our final documents and our documents that are complete. So we don't necessarily need to include our notes from a meeting or something like that. We need to include our final memo summary or only the documents that are necessary to convey all of the points that we just discussed above. And we don't have to show drafts of work papers that we corrected or replaced later on. We can delete those old ones and just keep the new correct ones. And also, we're not precluded from supporting the review report by other means in addition to our review documentation. So we might include written documentation contained in other engagement files. For example, if we performed a compilation or other non-attest services, we could include those files from those engagements within our review documentation. We can also include oral explanations. So if we wanted to clarify some information, we could write up an explanation or a summary of a discussion that we had, but this in itself doesn't count as review evidence. Instead, it should support review evidence elsewhere and only really serve as to clarify or explain the evidence that we've obtained. In addition, if we're a small firm and we only have one partner in the firm and he or she performs all the review work, then that partner is still required to comply with the requirement in paragraph 91 to prepare the documentation that can be understood by an experienced accountant, because the review documentation may be subject to review by external parties. So even though there's not going to be someone at the firm looking over this partner's shoulder to review his work, he still needs to document the work as if someone is going to come in and review it, because that might be the case in a peer review. And finally, findings or issues that in our professional judgment are significant might include results of the review procedures that indicate that the financial statements could be materially misstated, including actions that we took to address such findings, and the basis for our final conclusion. So we would need to include those items in our documentation of our review as well.